For the devotion, actually, I guess I selected one that's sort of a epilogue to Bob's lesson last week that had to do with reconciliation, among other things. And I selected just one verse from Genesis, and then I'll expand on that with something from Romans. But this, it's a little bit of a spoiler because this is from Genesis chapter 33, and it addresses reconciliation, this time for between Jacob and Esau. As we left off last week and this week, for the next couple of weeks, there's this division and schism between them. And so I looked at the coming two lessons after this one to make sure that it wasn't covered later, and it really isn't. The lessons for the next couple of weeks, for instance, today, as an example, let me find the beginning. Whoops, lost my place. The purpose of today's lesson is to grasp that our sinfulness will not thwart God's will. And then going on, I saw in the prayer for next week, again, that same theme. In the closing prayer, it says, let us know your nearness and love despite our failure to live according to your will. And then finally, the last lesson in this unit, again, it's the same thing, to marvel that God's blessings are not contingent on whether we are morally upright. So thus these verses that are selected in the next couple of weeks focus on these themes, and which is fine, but in doing so, we kind of left hanging as to what happens to Esau and Jacob. So I thought, well, I'll, just so you have peace of mind, I'm kind of giving it away with today's devotion. So forgive me for that. But okay, this is taken from Genesis chapter 33, verse 4. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So there is a happy ending, and it's not going to be addressed in this unit, so that's why I thought, well, I'll go ahead, let everyone know. And again, back to Bob's lesson last week, reconciliation, it finally does occur. So the devotion itself is entitled God's Heart Beats with Reconciliation. And in addition, I have another verse from Romans. It's chapter 12, verse 16. Paul says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud. Do not be conceited. Okay, so if anyone had good reason to hold a grudge, it would be Jacob's brother Esau. Jacob cheated Esau out of his birthright and his blessing. Then he fled because Esau planned to kill him as soon as their father Isaac died. Years later, after they both had wives and children, they met again, but Jacob was terrified that Esau still wanted to kill him. He sent messengers and lavish gifts ahead of him, hoping to appease his brother, but he need not have worried. As Jacob bowed before his brother, Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. Jacob responded, to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably. If we have also read the previous chapter, Jacob's response may remind us that Jacob had just had an experience of seeing God face to face. Now Jacob saw a reflection of God in Esau through their reconciliation. Paul calls us to live in harmony with other people, but we won't always succeed. We'll hurt others even if we do not do so intentionally, and others will hurt us. We'll have misunderstandings. We'll have anger. We will anger others and be angry at others. When we reconcile with one another, we see God's face because God's heart beats with reconciliation. So, yeah, that was sort of the theme that Bob was conveying, that reconciliation first requires reconciliation with God as well. So let us pray. Reconciling God, thank you for reconciling the world to yourself in Christ. Thank you for making us Christ's ambassadors of reconciliation. Help me to reconcile today with anyone who has hurt me. In Jesus' name, amen. So, all right. So, yeah, as we left off, before I actually read today's verses, I'm going to expand on it. But before I do that, let me summarize kind of where we left off. Okay. Last week's lesson concluded with the impulse of Esau selling his birthright to Jacob. Following that exchange, somewhat dysfunctional family, this being Jacob, Esau, and then, of course, Isaac and Rebekah, the four of them. The four of them tottered into the future with father Isaac growing older and Esau still roaming the fields, with Jacob still staying close to home and with mother Rebekah still trying to run the household, but depending more and more on Jacob, her favorite. So, in some ways, so the plot thickens. Rebekah, we've already established that Rebekah clearly favored younger son Jacob over older son Esau, but Isaac favored the outdoorsman Esau over the thinker and schemer Jacob. Isaac had just one more thing he could give his son, only one of them, and that was his blessing. So, in some ways, the fatherly blessing was deemed more important than even the birthright. The birthright is the inheritance. So but by long-standing custom, the blessing went to the oldest son. So fortunately, in that way, the oldest son was also Isaac's favorite. The birthright, which Esau had earlier sold to Jacob, was different from the blessing. The birthright in this culture had to do with inheritance, while the blessing had to do with spiritual destiny. So what we're going to find is Rebekah will do what many of us would be tempted to do. She took matters into her own hands rather than waiting for and trusting God. The Lord said that Esau would serve Jacob, and Rebekah was determined to make this happen. She didn't trust that the Lord would be true to the message she received, and so she took matters into her own hands. So that's sort of where we begin today. All right. So the lesson today, again, the purpose to grasp that our sinfulness will not thwart God's will. And to that end, certain verses were selected. Genesis chapter 27, 5 through 10, 18, 19, 21 through 29. Well, that kind of chopped it up. And if you leave out the other verses, you don't get the whole picture. So I'm going to read the whole thing in Genesis 27. And, all right. I'm going to read the whole thing. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit to Genesis 26, verses 34 through 27. Okay, let's see. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. That's where we leave off. Esau actually married Hittites, which were a branch, or were actually probably Canaanites, who are a branch of the Hittites. Hittite was a large kingdom in the Levant and in the Anatolia, the Turkish peninsula there, and kind of extended down into this region as well. So it's kind of, as far as I could determine, the Canaanites were in fact sort of a branch of these people. So the problem, they weren't at war or anything, the Israelites, but the Hittites, the Canaanites worshiped idols. So this was a terrible thing for Isaac and Rebekah. They didn't want the same thing to happen to Jacob, so keep that thought. So, all right, so going on to Genesis 27, I'm going to start at the beginning. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son," and he answered, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I am old, I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me my delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me, so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." So, okay, yeah, the plot thickens. Isaac is talking to Esau and asks Esau to do this one last thing for him. And and he says he will. And then, of course, Isaac at this point is blind or nearly blind. He probably just had cataracts, but in those days, that's what would happen. So he really couldn't see. It's good to know that as we go through. Now, Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So Rebekah heard the whole thing. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food that I may eat and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." But Jacob said to Rebekah's mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me and shall seem to be mocking, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing." His mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go bring them to me." So she's being a little deceitful, and it's we'll see what happens. So he went and took them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food, such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. Now, of course, Isaac's blind, but I guess in those days they did not wash with Tide, so your clothes probably had your scent. So she said, put on Esau's clothes, even though Isaac's not even going to see them. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. And she put the delicious food and the bread, which she had prepared, into the hand of her son Jacob. So, and here we pick up with the lesson. So he went into his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat my game, that your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you found me so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." So that's really being deceitful. Doubly so, because he even invokes the Lord. Not a good thing. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near me, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." Remember, he's got these goats getting him. All right. And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it near to me, that I may eat my son's game and bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate. And he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near me and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. So that's pretty all-encompassing. So, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac, his father, Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. He also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father, and he said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." His father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" He answered, "I'm your son, your firstborn Esau." Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate it all before you came, and I blessed him? Yes, he shall be blessed." As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he's taken away your blessing." Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he's taken away my blessing." Then he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac answered and said to Esau, "Behold, I made him lord over you, and all his brothers I've given to him for servants. And grain and wine I sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck." So that was his blessing. That's pretty anemic in comparison. That's hardly a blessing. To say you're going to live away from the fatness of the earth, and you shall serve your brother. But nevertheless, that was it. So, going on. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." Well, okay, needless to say, just around the corner, Rebekah was eavesdropping. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, "Behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran, and stay with him a while, until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you've done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day?" So, okay, so here's where things kind of backfire. So Jacob did get the blessing, and it was all the result of this deceit on the part of both Jacob and Rebekah, but now he has to go into exile. So what good is it? Not only that, Jacob is Rebekah's favorite son. She'll never see him again. So it kind of backfired. The whole thing that it seemed at first like you can get away with deceit, but eventually it catches up with you. So going on, then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me?" So what she's doing now is going to Isaac. She wants Jacob to flee, but she wants to make it Isaac's decision that he should leave. So she tells Isaac that, if he stays here, he may end up just like Esau marrying a Hittite instead of an Israelite. So why don't we send him off to Laban? So that's what happens. And the fact is now, I'll read just the beginning of Genesis 28. Next week, Genesis 28 starts with chapter 28, but verse 10. So I'm just going to read 1 through 5, and then this will pick up where we leave off next week. Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him, and charged him, and said to him, "You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there, the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may be the assembly of peoples, and give you the blessings of Abraham to you and your descendants with you, that you may inherit the land in which you are a stranger, which God gave to Abraham." So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. So there you have it. Off he goes into exile. And he goes to live with Uncle Laban, who's even more deceitful. So again, the plot thickens. So I encourage everyone to read Genesis 28 and 29. And eventually, of course, you'll get to where I started today, Genesis 33. So we kind of go full circle there and things get resolved. But it's a good story. So if you just read the verses that are part of the lesson, you'll miss out on the narrative. The plot does thicken further. All right, so again, looking at, I'm using for the most part, just to underline some of the thoughts in the adult Bible studies in our book. But there was one thing that caught my attention in the teacher's version that I thought I'd share, because it's actually almost humorous. I can just find it. Okay. Seeing the need. All right, so I found this kind of humorous. I was 8 years old and loved the once-a-week projects we Cub Scouts got to do. That said, one project has haunted me for the last 50 years, and I hope it continues doing so as long as I live. On this ill-fated afternoon, my fellow Cub Scouts and I learned that we would be making ashtrays. Can you, this is 50 years ago. So they were making ashtrays for their parents. So anyhow, yes, but this was 50 years ago. Okay, the project excited me because it involved pasting postage stamps onto the underside of a clear glass ashtray and then affixing a piece of blue felt on the back of the stamps. Voila, instant one-of-a-kind Christmas gift. Ashtray. Okay, actually, what excited me so much was not the ashtray, but the box of stamps on the table. I had started collecting stamps the previous years as another Cub Scout project. As I worked diligently on my ashtray, I surreptitiously slipped several stamps that I had never seen before into the front pocket of my jeans. I didn't ask permission to do so. I just flat out stole them to add to my stamp book at home. Later that evening, the dead mother called my mother to tell her what she had watched me do. When Mom questioned me about the incident, I compounded that by lying. I told my mom that I did not take the stamp. I knew both acts were wrong. I did them anyway. Thankfully, my sinfulness didn't convince God to abandon the decision to train me to become a United Methodist clergyman. So again, the theme, to grasp that our sinfulness will not thwart God's will. So, had to share that. And let's see if I've underlined anything else. Yeah, I guess, okay, so where was God in all of this? For despite Jacob's culpability in the lying and cheating, in the deception and dishonesty, God did not abandon Jacob. Instead, God made him the father of a great nation, just as God had promised Rebekah during pregnancy. God can and does forgive and make new, even in the depths of our sinfulness. For when God has a plan, no power on earth can thwart it. Not Jacob's lies, not Rebekah's deceptions, not Esau's anger, and not the Roman cross on the outskirts of Jerusalem many years later. So the good lesson there, and along those lines, I thought maybe thinking too, Jacob went on, had all these children, and he had a favorite, Joseph, and of course, again, you shouldn't have favorites, because then the others became jealous, and we know what happens there. But somehow, in spite of all of that, once again, God's plan prevails. So, reading on, but sort of history repeats itself with Jacob's family, but and it repeats itself today with our family sometimes. So anyhow, I thought I'd end with not so much reconciliation. I was first of all looking up the word derivation of reconciliation. Reconcile, of course, is to restore to friendship or harmony, to settle or resolve differences, and it comes from and then conciliar would be the Latin word, which is really conciliate in English, to overcome distrust or animosity, to regain or try to regain friendship or goodwill by pleasant behavior. And this word, in fact, comes from concilium, Latin word meeting. So I got to thinking about not so much reconciliation, but just meeting people and finding that we have things in common. And I've often said I enjoy meeting people for two reasons. Number one, everyone has such an interesting life, everyone. And the other thing, you always find you have things in common. Within minutes, you find you share things in common. And so I thought I would, I'm going to close with a prayer that kind of goes along that theme of finding our commonality. But even before I do that, I thought I'd mention that I had a really unique experience this fall. I was, after I retired, a few months of that, I kind of got a little bored and rebranded myself as a consultant. And then, so they really weren't beating down my door. But nevertheless, I got a call from another consulting firm in Chicago that they had been approached by an airline that needed someone to do this, that, and the other. It was something that they didn't do, but they knew I did. So the airline turned out to be Fiji Airways. So I had a 3-week contract that I just recently wrapped up, but it did include, or a 3-month contract, but it included 3 weeks in Fiji. So off I went to the South Seas. It was kind of amazing. And and it was so beautiful, these jagged mountains, all green. It was like valley high. And but if I think of one memory or one thought that would kind of encapsulate the experience, it would be the people, and building those connections and working with people. That this was some amorphous idea, Fiji in the South Seas somewhere that, where I had never been, knew no one, and suddenly I'm connected to these people and we're sharing our lives, and you get real close when you're working for 3 weeks. And the team there, they were just great, and they were so kind to me and took me around and had me over for dinner, one thing or other. But you realize we all share the same hopes and dreams, and we all have the same conflicts or challenges. I remember one morning, Lisette, the admin, came in, and she was just beside herself. She had a 13-year-old daughter. She said, "Oh, I don't know what to do. My daughter wants to create an Instagram account." And I thought, Instagram is way up in the South Seas. So it just shows you how we all have things in common. And so for the closing prayer, since we've been studying the Old Testament and among other things, I'm thinking of the other week in Pittsburgh, the massacre at the Jewish synagogue, I thought I'd end with a Jewish prayer. And this is, this is a prayer that is said as a benediction after Shabbat. And I know a couple weeks ago, after that occurrence, they encouraged everyone to go to Shabbat, even Christians. A lot of people did. Well, if you did that or do that ever, you will hear this benediction at the closing. And it's in Hebrew, though, and it's sung, so it's very mystical and mysterious. What are they saying? The first line in Hebrew, forgive my pronunciation, but it goes something like, Yevareh Heha Adonai Ve'ish Merecha. Okay, so what does that mean? And it's beautiful and very mystical, but what are they saying? So that's going to be my closing prayer. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
So, who knew? We do have something in common. You would never have thought that. That's from, that's called the priestly prayers. Probably all know. It's from Torah. It's from Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 through 26. So, there you go. So you all have things in common. And that's my lesson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Reconciliation, very important this age. If you didn't get a chance to read Betty Taylor's note last week, it will be back on the bulletin board. Now, if you're not doing anything on Friday night, November 16th, from 8 a.m. until Saturday, November 17th, you can join folks for Tent City out here on the church lawn. I don't think I'm going to do it, but we're welcome to. The church is providing tents apparently, and this is to bring an awareness to homelessness, and it is sponsored by, let's see, they're collecting pledges or donations for the Family Promise. I do have a brochure on it if anybody would like more information on it. Our Christmas party. I will be sending this notice out by email, and I will also have hard copies of it for next week. Joan has made arrangements for our party to be at San Jose Country Club on December 6th. At 6:30, the cost is $34, and you can make your check payable to Joan, and don't send it to her using the address in our brochure, because this is their new address and they're not there yet. So in the email, I will provide you an address to send it to Joan. Let's see, are there any other announcements? Oh, Bill, yes.
Joyce Hayworth called me this morning, and Bill is at Baptist South. His feet have started swelling again. So and remember him in your prayers. He's gone through a lot. He's had a lot of stress the last couple of months. He's been in and out of the hospital, so please pray for him.
I think it's cellulitis or cellulitis that he's suffering
And
with.
it's come and gone with him. And he was here last Sunday, led the singing, so pray
Anything
for
else?
him, please.
My brother Tim, who had never been in this class, but everybody knows him, is in Memorial. He had some problems after his hernia operation a week or two ago. but he's getting well, and they're gonna let him out Monday, so he's doing fine.
So we'll remember Kim in our prayers this week, and Bill. Anything else? Tom? Leave us laughing.
Don't touch the
Never
mic.
touch the mic.
Don't touch anything.
Matt, do this to you.
Thank you, that is doing
Speak into it, though.
Gotta do everything, right? This is called the Old Priest. An old Catholic priest lay dying. He sent a message for an Internal Revenue Service agent and his lawyer to come to the hospital. When they arrived, they were ushered up to his room. As they entered the room, the pastors held up his hands and motioned for them to sit on each side of the bed. The pastor grasped their hands, sighed contentedly, smiled, and stared at the ceiling. For a time, no one said anything. Both the IRS agent and the lawyer were touched and flattered that the old man would ask them to be with him during his final moments. They were also puzzled because the pastor had never given any indication that he particularly liked either one of them. Finally, the lawyer asked, "Father, why did you ask the two of us to come here?" The old pastor mustered all of his strength, and then he said weakly, "Jesus died between two thieves, and that's how I want to go."
We'll all stand with this.